I was 21 when I met him, but I didn't fall in love with him immediately. In fact, I didn't fall for him at all at first. In the beginning, it was just a passing connection, a glance, a word, a shared laugh over something insignificant. But somehow, over time, he managed to do something that most people never could. He made me feel seen. His name was Alex. He wasn't the type of guy the first usually went for. He didn't have the kind of charm that most people in our social circles seem to value. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, and he certainly wasn't the life of the party. But there was something about him, something quietly magnetic. He had this way of speaking, of listening, of paying attention to details that most people overlooked. His eyes were always so focused, like he was looking at me in a way that made me feel like I mattered. And when he smiled, well, it was like the whole room lit up. I met him in the most mundane of places, a coffee shop near campus where I would often go to study. I had seen him there a few times before, but it wasn't until one afternoon, after a particularly long day of lectures, that I finally mustered up the courage to approach him. He was sitting by the window, his nose buried in a book, with a steaming cup of coffee beside him. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I just wanted to make a fleeting conversation, something to shake off the fatigue from my day. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" I asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. He looked up from his book, and when our eyes met, there was a brief flicker of recognition in his gaze. "No, not at all," he said, his voice low and calm. There was no rush, no urgency in his tone. He made me feel like I had all the time in the world. I sat down, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks as I tried to think of something clever to say. "What are you reading?" I finally asked. "Oh, just a book on philosophy," he replied, his smile widening slightly. "It's a bit dense, but I'm getting through it." I nodded, suddenly feeling shy. I wasn't very into philosophy myself, but his casual mention of it made me feel like I had walked into a world I didn't fully understand. But instead of retreating into myself, I found myself leaning in, wanting to know more about him, even if I didn't have the language for it. "Sounds like a challenge," I said, forcing a smile. "How do you even get through something like that?" "It's about patience," he said simply, his eyes meeting mine again. "And sometimes, it's not about understanding everything. It's about sitting with the questions." I laughed softly, surprised by how deeply that resonated with me. I had always been someone who needed answers, who needed things to make sense. But Alex's words, his way of thinking, made me feel like I didn't have to have everything figured out. Our conversation that afternoon was simple, easy, and yet, it was the beginning of something that would change my life in ways I never expected. We talked about books, music, and our futures, subjects that seemed trivial at the time but somehow felt important in the way he spoke about them. With him, I felt like I could be myself without the pressure of having to fit into some mold. After that, we started seeing each other more often. At first, it was just casual meetings in the same coffee shop. We would talk for hours, discussing everything from our favorite songs to our childhoods. There was an ease to our connection, like two puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. It wasn't romantic at first, not really, but there was something undeniable about the way I felt when I was around him. My heart seemed to beat a little faster, my thoughts a little clearer. Alex had a way of making me feel like I was a better version of myself whenever he was around. Over the weeks that followed, I began to realize that I was falling for him. It wasn't the kind of love that came with fireworks or grand gestures. It was quieter, more subtle, a love that crept up on me when I wasn't looking. I found myself thinking about him long after our conversations ended, replaying his words in my head, wondering if he felt the same way. But I kept those thoughts to myself, unsure of what to do with them. After all, we were just friends, right? But one evening, everything changed. We were sitting on a park bench, watching the sunset together, both of us wrapped in the comfort of our quiet companionship. The air was cool, and the world around us seemed to slow down as the sky turned a soft shade of pink and purple. "Do you ever wonder if we're meant to be?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It was a question I hadn't intended to ask, but it slipped out before I could stop myself. Alex turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain what I was feeling. "Do you ever think about how some people just come into your life, and everything changes? Like they're meant to be there. He looked at me, his eyes intense, but there was a softness in him that made my heart skip a beat. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear, a gesture so simple, so intimate, that it took my breath away. I think some things happen when you least expect them, he said quietly. And sometimes, you don't realize how much they matter until they do. I felt a rush of emotions flood through me. I had been hoping for something more, but I was afraid to say it out loud, afraid to ruin what we had. I wanted to tell him that I had fallen for him, that I had been in love with him for weeks. But instead, I just nodded, trying to smile, even though I could feel the tightness in my chest. But then, he did something that caught me completely off guard. He leaned in, ever so gently, and kissed me. It was slow and hesitant at first, as if he, too, was unsure. But when I kissed him back, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, as if this was the moment I had been waiting for. The kiss deepened, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that this could be real. When we finally pulled away, we both sat in silence, the weight of the moment hanging between us. I didn't know what would happen next, or where this was going, but I knew one thing for sure. My life had changed in that instant. We spent the next few months navigating the complexities of a relationship, figuring out how to balance our feelings with the reality of our lives. Alex had his own struggles, his own uncertainties about the future, and I had mine. But through it all, we found something beautiful. Something that wasn't perfect, but real. But despite the love we shared, things didn't always go as I had hoped. The more time we spent together, the more I realized that there were parts of him he wasn't ready to share. There were walls he had built around his heart that I couldn't break through. He wasn't ready to commit, not yet, not when his life felt so uncertain. And so, one evening, after months of building something that felt so right, Alex told me something I wasn't prepared to hear. "I care about you so much, Lily," he said, his voice shaky, "but I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'm ready to be the person you need me to be." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known it was coming, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. The future we had talked about, the future I had imagined, suddenly felt like a distant dream. "I understand," I whispered, my heart breaking in two. "I just wanted you to know that I love you." "I love you too," he said, his voice filled with regret. "But I can't give you what you deserve right now. I need to figure out my own life first." And just like that, everything changed. The love we had shared, the connection we had built, was no longer enough to keep us together. It was a heartbreaking realization, but one that was necessary. Sometimes, love isn't enough to make things work. Sometimes, you have to let go, even when it hurts.